Well, I'm ready to rock and roll, says the dude that's been up since 4.
Jesus Christ, man, why?
Because I'm fucking old, and I wake up at 4 now. I go to bed like at 9 or 9:30 usually.
Well, we better get going so old man can go to bed.
Yeah, no kidding.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Alien Familiar RPG Podcast. I am Clayton.
I'm Jordan.
And I'm Eliot.
Before we get started, you can find show notes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/alienfamiliar. And if you would like to help us out with supporting the show, you can do so at patreon.com/alienfamiliarmedia. So if you enjoy our content and would like to help us out with hosting costs, any help you would be able to give us would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you for joining us today. Today we are going to be doing a good bit of speculation. We are jumping onto the bandwagon of the moment where people are wildly speculating about what is happening to D&D in 2024 following about a month ago as of a recording, some comments made during a D&D panel. So Jordan, you were the one who wanted to go over this in detail. I think we're going to be talking. Well, why don't you tell us what exactly we're going to be talking about today?
Well, I'd just like to kind of shoot the shit with you guys a little bit about what you'd like to see in an updated 5th edition. They keep saying update and new version. They won't cross that line and say a new edition.
They say an evolution of the game.
Yeah, it's super vague, and that can mean a lot of different things depending on who hears it. But I mean, we've all played a lot of 5th edition with each other, and we've all got our gripes, and we've all got a few things that we like about it, I think. But at the same time, like the 5th edition that we have now, with all of the supplements that have come out in the intervening year since its release, has changed the game significantly. So I feel like, if we take those things into consideration, we can roughly plot some kind of trajectory of, where we think this game is likely to be going in the next big step. So I don't know. That's just generally what I had in mind. I'm just curious, what some of your guys' thoughts are on it, and I've got a few thoughts of my own. But yeah, that's the outline I wanted to go with.
I think it's going to Kryn.
Really, you think so?
Well, I was gonna bring that up early on before we get into the nuts and bolts and the weeds of what we want, what we don't want. But I couldn't help but notice, what was the name of the new book? It was
Fizban's Treasury of Dragons.
Right. And in some of the promo kind of stuff out there, they were mentioning how they were going to be going back to some old favorite content or whatever. I mean, reading between the lines, I can't help but hope that this is going to kind of weave into a re-dipping into maybe hopefully a Dragonlance setting, hopefully.
Well, in the real world, Wizards did recently resolve out of court some legal action with that Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss brought against the company to do with Dragonlance. And what the details of that are is more wild speculation. But so far as I'm aware, it's been resolved, and my understanding is that it is possible for more Dragonlance content to be created now. I'm not sure to what extent Wizards and Wise and Hickman are going to be working on this, and who's going to have the reins, but I think that is a real possibility to bring up.
Well, not to put you on the spot, Jordan, but I think that I have some thoughts on where I would like it to go and what I think they ought to do. But there's to me there's two sides to this. It's what do I think that WotC ought to do to keep the game successful and continue to grow the hobby, versus what us long timers would maybe like to see in a system or some sort of new addition. So I feel like you're gonna take some hard lines here. I'd like you to outline kind of what your thoughts were.
Me?
Yeah, you. I'd like to know, what do you seem to be, I think you're the most vocal critic of 5e, and so, why don't you jump in with what you think they're going to do, whether those things are good and bad, what you'd like them to do, and then I've got a couple thoughts of my own.
Okay, well, overall, we can get into specifics here in a little bit. What I suspect is that we're probably not going to be able to avoid more power creep over the course of this edition. That's been the trend with every edition prior to my knowledge, and I think that the same is going to happen here. And
what do you mean by power creep?
So the trend is that when the first printing of a new edition comes out, that kind of sets the baseline of what the power levels are for classes, races, spells, etc. As supplemental material comes out, of which we've had a pretty good deal for 5th edition, these new things, in order to be interesting, to sell books, to push boundaries in new directions, often wind up being more powerful than the initial options that were available, so that those things sort of become obsolete. There's a pretty good argument to be made that if you strip away all the thematic appeal of whatever archetypes there might be, a lot of the newer archetypes that have come out in the most recent books are just numerically more powerful than your options out of core player handbook. Same goes for a lot of spells, and a lot of times you get like weird broken combos that people complain about endlessly on RPG Stack Exchange and Reddit and whatever. So that trend I think is probably going to have to continue, because I don't think that anyone would find a weaker version of something for the system to be in any way appealing. And also the changes that they're making with races, taking away any kind of penalties, that kind of indicates to me that the design philosophy is always pushing towards bonuses, and the difference is being expressed in bonus terms, because they find expressing differences in terms of penalties to be distasteful. So that only furthers the push towards, ever more powerful options. And I think they've said as much in that video. A lot of new races are going to be available with various magical powers and so on. And, eventually it's like, well, what's the point of playing a regular human or, regular elf or whatever it is?
To your point about the races, I've definitely noticed that with the past couple of books that they have released. They've, starting with the Ravenloft book that came out earlier this year, they started with what are called lineages, where it's not really a race, it's more of a template you put over top of an existing race. And with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, they completely threw out the idea that each race has a predestined ability bonus. You can now move that around at your whim to put it where you want it to go, to make every single race optimal for every single class.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the biggest changes that we're going to see, is that nothing is going to mean anything anymore, because it's all infinitely modular. And so there won't be any of these historically understood like tropes and so on that have been part of the game. Like that culture of the game, I think, is going to be just completely like pushed aside, and it's all going to be infinitely customizable to whatever a player wants to have. And in some ways I think that's cool, depending on how they do it. I don't know, we'll just have to wait and see. I think it's crazy that they're going to that level of customization and we still don't have like a reasonable skill point system.
So for anybody who wants to check out kind of really the only information that we have is, I believe it's called Future of D&D. You can check it out on YouTube. It's a panel discussion, but I was watching it earlier today and kind of getting, trying to read the tea leaves a little bit about what hints they were kind of dropping. Um, and a couple of words kind of just summed up kind of my thoughts is like one was consolidation, and the other one was like what you just kind of said was customization. First of all, just another question I just kind of want to pose to you guys: do you think it's a good thing that the next kind of iteration of Dungeons and Dragons is going to be backwards compatible? I think was the word they used. That it's not going to be a whole cloth switching to a completely new set of rules or whatever that makes the previous edition not just another rebuy books basically. Me personally, I'm actually kind of excited. I'm glad that that's the way that they're going, more like a 3.5 versus third edition mode. But do you think that's kind of what they ought to do, or do you think that is that a disappointment to you guys?
I personally don't think they're going to follow the third edition to 3.5 model. I really don't think they're going to do that, where if you started playing 3.5 books, there were things in third edition that then needed to be translated or transitioned into the new iteration of the rules. I do not think that that's going to happen. I think we're going to see something very similar to what they did in the mid-cycle of 4th edition when they came out with the 4th edition Essentials. What they did there was they re-released new versions of the core books with completely revamped classes, and all of the adventures, all of the material that had existed before in 4E was 100% compatible. You could still put those classes against a monster that was in the original monster manual, and you could run it just as it was. There would be no problem. You could continue to play a fighter that you had built using the original core rule book for 4th edition. You could build that fighter right next to one of the I want to say one of the options was a Slayer fighter option in 4th edition Essentials, and those two classes were compatible in a party together, and there was no difference. There were difference in class abilities, but there really wasn't a difference in how the rules interacted with each particular character.
I'm not sure I'd put much stock at all in the term backward compatible. It has always seemed like a marketing term to me personally, and arguably within 5th edition, there's supplements that are not compatible with each other. So I don't know. I think that's just kind of like, it's okay, you won't have to buy new books, don't freak out. Like it's totally that kind of talk. I think we probably are going to see some pretty significant rebalances in character classes and stuff. Like that ranger, the eroded ranger, is for sure going to be something that gets touched on. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to fix the monk again. I'm really curious to see what the survey results are, because all I have is anecdotal evidence of my own experience playing the game and what people often say online, but I wouldn't be surprised if the paladin gets nerfed quite a bit. That's a few thoughts, but yeah, largely I think it's going to be numerically roughly in the same ballpark. I don't think there's going to be anything wildly different.
I don't think anything is going to get nerfed. I think they're just going to try to bring everything up to the same level. I don't think they're going to try to push back in order to correct that.
Yeah, you're right. That's what I meant. And that's the hilarious thing about removing penalties to other races. When humans get +1s across the board, every race that doesn't get a +1 effectively has a -1. It's just hidden. Humans have to be the baseline for the system because they're the only thing that we actually know how it works. And so, of course, everything else is going to be relative to what a human can do. It's fucking ridiculous.
Well, see, I don't know. I guess I'll try to play the contrarian a little bit because I don't 100% agree. We should probably get into the past. I personally wasn't playing and have yet to play. I would love to play a straight down the line advanced D&D, the classic form. All the old heads, whenever I started playing, that was the game they played with proficiencies and THAC0 and all that. And from what I understand, it was very much like, definitely unintelligible to a third edition person, because I remember the horror that all the experienced gamers had when third edition came out, and then they immediately bought the books and started playing third. But, and just the same way, though, we're playing some old D&D, and I would imagine it's also fairly unintelligible to those systems as well. Looking at it from a reality standpoint, some of the vibes I was picking up from them, I think I got the impression that they realize one thing, that fifth edition is by far the golden goose that they've been given. It's the most successful version. It's the most well-played version. And I would imagine if I were them, or if I was in their position, I would have a ton of trepidation going into a new version of the books, which they have to do, business-wise, they have to, but make this new version so different that a person couldn't own the core books that we all own now, but then go out and buy, say, a setting book for the future, or a complementary book in the future, and it not be compatible. So the vibes I personally was picking up was that they were kind of making the promise. I don't, who knows if they're going to keep that promise, but they were kind of making the promise that the future version was going to be playable in, to a pretty well, doable extent without these new books. And I'm sure they're banking on the fact that anybody who loves D&D will buy the new books just because. But, some of the innovations that they were talking about, I thought the conversation they had about this new Christmas pack or whatever that's coming out in January, this gift pack, was pretty telling, because it comes with 2 books that already exist, which I guess are new editions with some edits. But then, what was the name of the new? There is a new product in that book, and I'm always skeptical, skeptical, I guess is the word, of any compilation that they package a new product in, because they realize that a lot of people have these other books, so they want you to buy them, which to me tells me like surplus. Maybe they have surplus product, I don't know, and so they're packaging it with a new product. That kind of tells me that they know that these 2 books, what is it, Tasha's Cauldron and Xanthar's, I would imagine that a lot of that information is going to be redundant in the new edition. And when they talked about this new book, I think I'll find it in my next pause.
Monsters of the Multiverse.
Yeah, they talked a lot about having basically almost like another monster manual. It's going to have a ton of new monsters. It's going to have a ton of new playable classes.
Nope.
Is that wrong?
That's not my understanding. My understanding is that it's going to be a reprint of all of the planar monsters that have been released so far. So the entire package is going to be a reprint of some sort.
Okay. So that goes back to the consolidation. That they're consolidating a lot of these, monsters here, monsters there, classes here, classes there. But the interesting thing that I found was that when they talked about how some slight changes they made, they had a good conversation about the magic user, and that their goal was, when they were writing that book, was that they were kind of looking back on magic wielding monsters and NPCs, and they have taken away the spell list from the monster and incorporated them into a series of actions that monster can take. And that the idea being that they're going to make it easier on the DM to run a magic using NPC without having to have half a dozen books open, because maybe one of the spells is from this and that book. To me, that tells me 2 things. A, great, because I like that. Maybe that's a little 4th edition-y for people. I don't care. I personally, as a DM, found it very difficult to run magic wielding creatures and NPCs. And so the idea that they can just be in a series of actions, I love that. But secondly, I feel like what they're trying to do is they're I think that might speak to this new edition, that they've realized that they've errated. I mean, I'm sure they didn't expect D&D 5e to be so successful. And when they continue to churn out these new books with new abilities and things, I would imagine what I was kind of reading. I'd like to see your all's thoughts, but I think that they're going to be doing a lot of the same things to the core book. They're going to be taking a lot of the things that they've put out in other editions, supplements. They're going to be pulling it into the core edition, and any further refinements that they maybe have gotten from surveys or playtesting and things like that, they're going to incorporate that into the core book and kind of almost make it a 2.0, where if I had to guess, I'm guessing it'll actually be closer to 5th edition than 3.5 was to 3, in that it's more going to be just a rounding up of all the loose ends that they've allowed to be out there and putting it in a core book so that they can move forward with much the same system and build on it. I mean, is that the vibes you guys got?
I'm glad you picked up on that thing about the magic with the monsters and the 4th edition design philosophy, because that was the first thing I thought as well when I saw that is, oh, it's just like 4th edition was. And I would bet that what's happened is that Wizards of the Coast has seen this huge rush to virtual tabletops because of COVID, and the crazy money that's made. It's made them some money too, but other people were taking a cut as well. I would bet that they probably want to try to resurrect their business strategy from 4th edition, which was to make it a digital product primarily, because that's why 4th was designed that way. And they had a virtual tabletop that they were developing, but I believe a murder-suicide is part of why we never saw that actual offering among some Wizards of the Coast engineering staff, if I'm not mistaken. But I think that they are probably going to do tweaks wherever possible to make the system work more in a VTT environment. And I wouldn't be super surprised if Hasbro ends up acquiring Roll20 or one of the other successful virtual tabletops in the near future and has an in-house property like that.
I definitely think that if they are planning on going that direction, that is the way that they should go, to acquire something that's already existent, because they have had nothing but trouble when it comes to bringing virtual tabletop to people, even back as far as second edition had Rules Cyclopedia, which you could get on a disc with like a player character generator, I want to say. And 3rd edition came with a CD that had a character generation program on it. And then 4th edition had the promise that it was all going to have a virtual tabletop, which, like you said, like eventually just became vaporware. I see D&D Beyond as basically them going that way, but I think it would be very smart of them to try to grab up and pay for somebody else who has already done all of that legwork and has proven that they have a system that works.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think them, purchasing Roll20 would be amazing, but something equivalent that's just as good would be common sense.
They're already trying it with D&D Beyond, and I don't know. I don't pay for D&D Beyond. I don't know anybody that does. But God, let me tell you, back in the day, that for 2nd edition, the core rules software was one of the coolest things that I had D&D related in my childhood. If they would make a product anywhere near as awesome as that was for 5th edition, I would spend my money on it for sure.
I don't know, man. I think I think that the money, I think they realize with 5th edition is that the money is to be made in purchasing books that people want. I think we talked about it in a previous podcast, that just the difference between tabletop and digital. I would hope that they don't try to marry themselves again to the idea of trying to transition to a digital platform. I mean, it makes sense to integrate or to at least control ownership wise how people play, or the most successful way people play D&D online. As a company, that just makes sense. But it really scares me, the idea that they would try to transition it to more of a digital platform at its core, because that just doesn't seem as profitable as selling books. And I don't know, to me that just, maybe it's just I'm an old, maybe that's my old head coming out. I just think that that's not what the hobby's about. And I think, I just think that the publishing side has to be their bread and butter.
No way. It's way more profitable to do digital stuff because the overhead is effectively zero. I mean, they said in that video that they'd had problems with printers and supply chain and stuff like that because of COVID, because they're dealing in physical property here. I'm sure they've got printers in China or wherever, and, everything's kind of ground to a halt. It's nothing to copy a PDF off of a server with your login. Yeah, and man, let me tell you, they want microtransactions. It's not here yet, but it's gonna be. And I think Roll20 are the ones who are like pioneering this with the asset packs and whatever. I don't know what else D&D like WotC people might have in mind, but guarantee you they're trying to figure out how to get past just the straight book purchases and figure out how to start nickel and diming this thing.
Their toes are already in that water. On D&D Beyond, you can either buy one of the existent books for, I want to say, $30, which the books sell retail for $50. So I doubt that they can that the $20 difference is just the cost of the book. I think that they are making hand over fist by selling the digital content as a whole. And you also have the option of, if you just have a particular race or a particular class that you want to play, you can buy that piecemeal on D&D Beyond.
Yeah, and the days of the grognard showing up with the duffel bag full of 50 pounds of hardback books and binders is long over. I mean, for one thing, people barely meet in person at all right now. But even after the COVID shit's done with, like, people are showing up with tablets, laptops. No one's showing up with a gigantic stack of books. Like, that's fucking crazy.
I mean, I guess, I'm arguing for a version of play that even I no longer am loyal to anymore, because I'm the perfect example of somebody who they're probably after, because, I ran a Strahd game. I've never owned the Strahd book. I have bought the book from, I own it from Roll20, because the advantage of having the book was just not enough for me. But having it integrated into the Roll20 system so that it made for a more streamlined, easy DMing experience was 100% worth the money I paid. And, yeah, I mean, I guess I can't argue with that. It was far better money having it already in the digital platform than a paper book ever would have been. So, I mean, I guess I'm kind of the example of what I'm arguing against.
I'm worried that we're going to drift more back towards 4th edition very, very subtly, because a lot of those design decisions and how powers worked and all that kind of shit was made with, the grid map in mind primarily as, the mode of play. And Roll20 and COVID and everything has forced us into doing that kind of thing a lot. Sure, there's, some theater of the mind stuff you can do, but when you've got a virtual tabletop, you're going to use the virtual tabletop. And I really hope it doesn't go that direction, but yeah, between the monster stuff and how it seems like every single class has some way of doing some sort of magical shit, well, that, to my mind, is going to translate into your little avatar having some sparkly shit fly around, and then you get your dopamine hit while you're looking at your virtual tabletop, and then you want to do it again, and just get you on that fucking cycle. Like flashy powers and blah blah blah. It's all like, you see that in all digital design at this point. That's why fucking Robinhood was getting called out for turning investment into some dopamine slot machine cycle. I am almost certain that we're going to see shit like that manifesting in Roll20 and WotC VTT products, whatever they wind up being, very soon.
I don't think we're going to see the spell list go away in any form. I think we're still going to continue to see spell lists for player characters, and I think most of that is going to stay the same. I think the changes that they're making for the monsters is just going to be for the monsters, because it is tough as hell to play a spellcaster monster or enemy at the tabletop, and you've just got a list of spells, and you've got to, if you don't know what all of the spells do off the top of your head, you've got to look it up. And I think all of that is just to streamline the DM's portion of it. I don't think we're going to see a change from what we already have with class abilities.
And I'm totally on board with their design philosophy when they were discussing it, at least, in the shallow water, was that, it's also going to improve the player experience, because they're not going to be waiting on the DM as much. And, they're also changing. I mean, it's not just that they're adding spells as actions for monsters. They're also changing the actions available to these monsters in general to reflect the fact that they're magical, but not have to, encumber the DM with just page and page after page turning and stuff. And, I mean, to me, that's an improvement. Shout out to Robinhood, because my portfolio is up $150 off of a $250 investment. Shout out.
Your Dogecoin finally went up in value.
Oh yeah, I'm all Bitcoin, baby.
I wonder if they're going to try to address the complaint that I've heard from every single person, it seems like, who's ever run 5th edition, which is, how do you challenge players? If they
talked about that.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm wondering, like, mechanically though, do you think they're going to make like the death saves rule into an optional rule, or like change it in some way? I mean, obviously they can make bigger monsters or whatever, but like, I don't know. It seems like they have to do something, or else like people are going to stop having fun eventually when they just know they're bound to win no matter what. That's not a fun game.
That's a part of my optimism about it too, is that I think, once again, I just armchair quarterbacking here, but just looking at kind of the tone of what they said, because they mentioned how the action change for spells was a part of a broader attempt to address that issue, that it's the challenge rating system sucks. I mean, they didn't just say that, but they basically said that it's clear from their own playtesting and feedback that the challenge rating system is not adequate to put up a good fight to a lot of players. And so that's why, I watched a commentary on that video, like another take on it, and he noted that one of the WotC people was wearing an Advanced Dungeons and Dragons t-shirt, and speculated that might have been a bit of an Easter egg. And I think that if I were them, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna chime in that's the new lead designer guy. That guy took Mike Merle's spot when Mike Merle's got shit canned.
Okay. Well, I mean, if I were them, I mean, Clayton, you know this offhand. You've said it a few times. How old is it now? Are we past a decade of 5th edition?
5th edition came out in 2014. So it'll be 10 years old when D&D is 50 years old.
Yeah, it's the oldest continuously played, edition, correct?
No.
Not the oldest.
1st edition, definitely.
Well, okay. But, I would, maybe I'm crazy, but I would say that AD&D, the 80s version of D&D, but, I mean, still, it's an extremely old, it's been a long time for them to do a retool. And for it, because it's been so successful, looking at the land, you've got a bunch of players out there who they're trying to re-engage or continue to engage and bring interest up to bring in new players, and they know that new players are brought in by being recruited, right? And they have a bunch of very very experienced players now out there. Even this mythical new player now is probably been playing for a while now if they're going to go out and rebuy the books. And I would like to think that they're going to rely on the fact that your average Dungeons and Dragons player who might buy this book or new books, they're kind of like, talking about the things we've been saying. It's a little basic, it's a little easy, and something we shared in a chat unrelated to this was Jordan, was it you that shared the analytics of Roll20, right? Was that you?
Yeah, I think so.
The first thing that jumped out at me was that the second most played game on Roll20 was Call of Cthulhu, which I've played it a bit, but I know it more by reputation that it's just a very lethal, very macabre, dark setting. It wouldn't be a huge shock to me that they've looked at that and said, okay, well, players are looking for a challenge, a little more lethality, maybe even a dark kind of tone. Hopefully they're going to be, I would hope that in this next edition they balance it out, make it more challenging, especially at the higher levels. Leave levels 1 through 5 essentially alone, and then but once you get past level 5, hopefully they'll address those issues and make the game a little bit more balanced. That, I think it would be, we constantly complain about that.
I think they're going to balance encounters in a completely different way. I think that what they're finally going to do is acknowledge how many encounters a D&D group actually does in an adventuring day before they stop and do a long rest. I think in 5th edition, there's still the assumption that you're going to do like 5 or 6 adventure or encounters in a day. Everybody goes Nova. They blow through their most powerful stuff as quickly as they can, and then when they get done, with all their powerful stuff, they do like 2 or 3 fights, and then they rest for the day. The only times that doesn't happen is when the DM is literally pulling out all of the stops in order to prevent the player characters from being able to do that. I think they're going to reword and rebalance their encounter making math to take that into account. Or at least that's what I hope that they are going to do, because I see that as being the easiest way to solve this challenge, this problem of the encounters not being hard enough, or the encounters not being challenging enough.
Yeah, I agree.
By the way, I just looked it up. If you count basic Dungeons and Dragons as being its own thing, depending on when you decide that started, either with BX or with the BECMI version, that went from some point in the late 70s, depending on which one of those you want to pick, up until 1999. So there's arguably 23 years of basic Dungeons and Dragons continuous run that you could pull from. So that smokes any edition of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And it's as much a predecessor of 3rd edition D&D as 2nd edition AD&D was.
Cool story, bro.
Hey, fuck you, man. I'm just trying to be accurate.
Jordan, I appreciated you proving Eliot wrong.
Fuck him anyway.
Is it really wrong when there are like more successful versions that are playing at the time that even like, anyway, never mind. But it seems like we're kind of all optimistic. Am I wrong? Or not? Am I wrong?
I wouldn't say I'm optimistic. I just have the mentality of I've been here before, and this will be another edition change, whether or not they want to actually call it that or not. It's going to have all of the same effect, and I'm not bitter about it because I've been there so many times, and I continue to play, and I continue to love the game.
I wouldn't say I'm optimistic. I haven't been particularly excited for 5th edition in quite a while, and none of their products have really grabbed me in any way. There's a lot of things that I think they could do to improve the experience. Having like a reasonable crafting system for like magic items and stuff. Like that's one of those things that's not even compatible between books, like DM's Guide to Xanathars or whatever you're looking at. Shit like that.
That has to be done. That has to get done. Crafting has to get done better.
Yeah, and I'd like to see more late game stuff. That's something that I wouldn't be surprised if they try to put a little bit of focus on. Building up a barony or whatever for higher level characters, because the stats show that games tend to fall apart around like 10th level ish, if not sooner, and I think they might try to spend some time trying to make that late game a little more interesting. And I don't know what approach they're going to take to it, but there's a few ways they could go with that.
This is why I'd love, I don't know, we need like an insider or something. I'd love to see the results of those surveys, and I don't know if it even covered that topic, but to me, this is where my skepticism of capitalism kind of kicks in that, I feel like they're only going to do things that are going to like spur new, profits. And I don't know how profitable it is for them to encourage long game play, because if you're a long, if a long game is I feel like I ran a medium term game and it was a year, and you figure we have the same players in the same books in kind of like a consumerist stasis, because if we're playing the game, we got what we need. I've never felt like they've had a whole lot of concern for making the late game super intricate or fun, because if you're playing late, you're not bringing in new players. You figure if you start a new game, you're gonna have maybe one or two new players, and those are one or two new consumers.
No, I mean, with prior editions, what they did was make high-level adventure modules to cater to that, which you can purchase. They would make supplements for epic-level play, monster manuals with much higher-level CR monsters than anything that you saw before. Just a whole nother layer of difficulty lacquered on top of the base game that they're selling in order to appeal to those people who've got long-running campaigns. I mean, I think that's probably a smart move for them to try that, because, look at your Ravenloft game. We got to 11th, 12th level or something like that. And then we just kind of ran out of content from the adventure that we'd blown through. And, we didn't have another adventure to jump into from there. Yeah, you were tired of it or whatever, but taking that aside, there's a lot of players who would be very invested in their characters and would definitely buy books that would allow them to keep playing those characters that they've gotten attached to over the course of a year or whatever. I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
You're probably right there.
I think the biggest problem is the GMs. I know I cannot run a game that long that goes into that high level and still maintain the steam in my engine in order to continue going. I just get tired of the campaign, especially where I devote so much time and resources outside of the game, thinking about it, plotting it out, preparing for what's going to happen, and I burn myself out of it, and that's why my games don't go into those higher levels that you're talking about, that there's a dearth of material for.
I'd also like to say that I'm virtually certain that we're going to see Spelljammer, and I'm about equally certain that we are never going to see Planescape again.
I agree with that, as someone who loves Planescape.
Yeah, I'd love to play in a modern Planescape, but the ideological emphasis of that setting is a fucking hot potato that Hasbro is not going to go anywhere near. That is fucking plutonium.
I feel compelled to kind of almost wrap up kind of my summative thoughts on what little information we have. And it's almost like I kind of want to write a love letter to WotC, which is probably going to make you guys roll your eyes. But, I know we give D&D a lot of shit, but, and 5th edition in particular. But, at the end of the day, I like I like just these tiny little morsels that we've gotten. I like that they're not kicking this whole generation of player to the curb, kind of like I felt like my generation was. I like the idea that, I mean, because me personally, I was completely turned off by fourth. I don't know if it was just that's not where I was in my life or the game sucked. I kind of feel like maybe both. But, you know, they're moving, when they moved into fifth edition, all in all, I like it. It brought a new, I think when culture, I think we've talked about this before. I think culture kind of came back to D&D a little bit, but at the same time, the product was good enough that when the culture came back to it, the culture liked it, and now the hobby's bigger than ever. As much as we talked in the last episode about how crappy, it is to not be able to be in person, I personally prefer to be able to play in the digital medium with the people I would like to play with versus playing in person with people that are just available. I just looking in the forward, if they do dabble in the digital sphere more, they try to integrate it into more of an online platform. If they streamline these books, I'm really just rooting for them. I hope that WotC does it well. I really am thankful for the hobby, having the D&D still as a culturally relevant thing, and maybe that's why I'm trying to take an optimistic stance, because I really want it to be successful, and I think it can be. I think there's every reason to think it will be, and it kind of gets me excited. I'm looking forward to see what they have.
I'm glad Mike Merles is gone.
Do you guys think that there is anything in the current books that is going to be just completely dropped from the new books that are coming out?
I think they're going to rephrase race completely. I'd be shocked if you see the word race in any WotC material going forward.
That's a possibility. Yeah.
Any of that stuff that has to do with like, well, you know how dwarves are, or those orcs, they tend to be like X, Y, and Z. All that kind of shit's going to be turned into some toggle switch, some like character option or whatever. And that's going to be fucking weird, man. Like, am I going to be able to play like a Baylor Paladin of St. Cuthbert? Like, are they going to draw any line anywhere?
There's definitely going to be I think they already have done this, a totally like pink and blue hair male elf wielding a great axe. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, everybody's got that undercut haircut.
And then in 10 years, we'll look back on what comes out and we'll be viewing it the same way that we viewed all of the stuff that World of Darkness published in the 90s.
That's fucking exactly what I was just thinking. All that fucking cringy trench coat goth shit. Yep, it's going to be the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
Do you guys think there's any chance that we're going to get some fucking skill points? Like, for God's sake, is that really, like, I'm going to be able to make whatever kind of, like, buffet style, orc, dragonborn, like, whatever kind of hybrid creature, and I'm still not going to be able to allocate skills on a point-by-point basis?
I believe that you will never... In the current edition, you will not see skill points again.
I am optimistic, though, that they're going to introduce some new mechanism. I mean, I don't know why I am, but I'm hopeful that they're going to maybe, bring back or revisit the idea of maybe proficiencies or almost like sub-skills. Because that is, to me, a glaring weakness of 5th. I love the simplicity, and it makes sense to me. And so I really don't want to criticize it too much, because I do remember the days of making, I think it was the rogue, was it the human? There was the rogue race combo that just gave you a crazy number, with your intelligence bonus, a crazy number of skills that you could just put everywhere. And, you just had you were just overwhelmed. It took me like an hour to make my character sheet just on the skill section. And I don't know that I think that that's where we need to go back to, but just maybe like some subcategory classes where you can get a little bit more nuance, a little bit more uniqueness, some bonuses for like situational bonuses that maybe whenever you're bluffing, maybe you can make a character who can sense motive on like a a criminal better than they can a noble or something like that, to give your character a little bit more uniqueness. But, I don't know. Maybe I'm being pie in the sky, because they definitely tried to do that in your class abilities. They tried to, put that uniqueness off the skills and more in class abilities. And I don't know why that would change, but
it's so weird to me that they're making races so customizable, so you can do whatever kind of combination that you want. But classes, skills, and feats, I doubt are gonna be customizable in that way. Like I think they're probably gonna stay with the class archetype stuff and not really let you mix and match class abilities in the way that I would like to see. So like it's so weird that who your character is super customizable, but what your character knows is like set in stone. That's a fucking really strange design philosophy to me.
See, that doesn't bother me for whatever reason, but yeah, I can see why you would feel limited by that. I don't personally. I just don't mind the idea of races as a concept being more, manifold. Is that a fancy word I could use here? Like, I don't mind that. I don't think that. I think we've outgrown the Tolkien influence at this point in D&D. I don't mind that an elf could be geared towards just about any class. That doesn't bother me.
I don't know. I resist it because I think it makes it not matter at all. When anybody can do anything, then it's as meaningless as your character's description, like physical description, and it's really robbing a lot of the juice out of some of these settings, I think, because like the people and creatures of the world are what make the thing interesting. And if it's all just kind of a sort of a homogenous random collection of things off of a list, like there's no culture to anything. So like, who cares?
I don't know. I guess I'm on the record for saying I don't care.
Completely apropos to nothing we've talked about so far. Do you guys think that dark vision is going to be any different, where either everybody is going to have access to it in one way or another, or fewer people are going to have access to it? Because I see right now, if you're playing a race that doesn't have dark vision, it's like a competition to see how quickly you can get it, to the point where it's becoming pointless to not have it.
It's a perfect example of what I was talking about. Like it's crazy to have like any kind of random thing like that be an option. I would not be surprised at all if there's some like background or some kind of something where everybody can just get dark vision. And then at that point, like you were saying, why doesn't everybody just take dark vision? And if everybody has dark vision, why the fuck is there such a thing as dark vision?
If I had to guess, I think the races will continue to have their uniqueness in those ways, those traits, those abilities, advantages. But they're going to continue to get, like you said, with the stat block kind of stuff, they're going to get to shift that stuff around to be more suited to other classes. Maybe we might even see a greater variety of sub races, or that the dwarf has basically a version that works for almost any class. If I had to guess, if anything, humans are just going to get shit on.
Humans are shit on right now. There is no since Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, since that came out, there's practically no reason to play a human.
And yet I almost always do, except in Jordan's game.
So are we about ready to head on to geek things?
Yeah, I guess I'm ready if you guys are.
Yes, sir.
All right. Before we do that, I just want to say one last thing. This has been a hope of mine for the past several editions. Please take gnomes out of the fucking player's handbook. When was the last time you ever saw someone play a gnome? Thinking back over the entirety of my gaming career for 23 years, I can only remember one player playing a gnome.
Clayton, that's racist.
Fuck gnomes. Sitting in my lawn, watching me.
Dude, we're going to get like 8 kinds of gnomes. There's going to be so many gnomes in 5.5. Pink-haired gnomes. Did y'all see that fucking Dragonborn bard Is that not the stupidest thing you've ever fucking seen? How do you play a lute with claws?
Well, not to be the guitar nerd in the group, but it would be actually really easy and preferable to have 5 picks on your hands.
How are you not cutting your strings? They're weapons. Anyway, I feel the same way about Dragonborn as you feel about Warforged, Eliot. I think they're just a stupid fucking thing that never should have been in the game.
No, I completely agree. I think most of those Warforged, Tiefling, Dragonborn, all that stuff, they're just stupid. But that's just me being a oldie.
I love the monstrous races. I play one every time I can.
Baylor Paladin, I'm telling you. As soon as 5.5 drops, that's what I'm doing.
All right, let's go ahead and go on to Geek Things. Right now, I really don't have hardly anything for Geek Things, so I'm going to recommend some YouTube channel that I found a while ago and just never had an opportunity to recommend it. It is Terrible Writing Advice. It is an animated short, a series of animated shorts that come out periodically, like every couple weeks or so. And basically, the author of it is going through and just picking apart like all of the different tropes and cliches that are used in writing and making fun of them in one way or another. So if you like that type of animation, I recommend Terrible Writing Advice on YouTube.
So I got 2 of them. The first one is this hilarious thing that I found just the other day. So on GitHub, the guy's account is Healy Codes, and he has created this thing that is Doom running in the web browser, not as Doom as you know it, but using checkboxes, HTML checkboxes, to be the pixels of this game. So you've got Doom at a very low resolution in essentially black and white or blue and white, depending on how your browser renders checkboxes. And he's rapidly switching these checkboxes off and on to show you what playing through Doom is like. And it's fucking playable. It's crazy. It's a hilarious project. Check it out. That's pretty fucking brilliant, honestly. I've got another one, but give me 1 second.
I'll take this moment of downtime to thank all of our listeners in China. It wasn't that long ago that Clayton informed me that we have a large section of our listeners in China for whatever reason. And shout out y'all. You're the best.
+1 for China.
Gina.
The other thing I wanted to... I know you are. The other thing I wanted to recommend is... the book, The Saga of Old City. This is the first fantasy novel that Gary Gygax wrote set in Greyhawk. I think this came out in like 84 or something like that, a long time ago. It's a little bit hard to find. I don't know. I found it off some random site, but I'm not going to say it's a very well-written book because it isn't, but as a piece of archaeology of gaming, it's super interesting to read the creator of Dungeons and Dragons telling a first-person story of this kid who, grows up in the slums and eventually becomes a very skilled thief, and his adventures across the world of Greyhawk and, encountering various Dungeons and Dragons-y type of shit along the way. It's given me a lot of insight into what Gary Gygax was like gesturing at with these rules that he was making, and how it must have been playing out in his head, at least the way that he presents it to the public as, literature. It's a fun read. I'm definitely enjoying it, and I'm nerding out on it. It's no Tolkien or anything, but it surprised me how fucking dark it is. It is incredibly dark. I should probably drop like a trigger warning here. This is not The Hobbit. This is not Dragonlance. This is no happy frolic kind of fantasy stuff. This is brutal and bleak. More of the tradition of like Michael Moorcock and the Elric saga kind of like hardcore fantasy than happy high fantasy stuff. But yeah, Saga of Old City. I'm enjoying it more than I thought I would.
So if this was published in 84, is that like right around the time he divorced his wife and moved to LA and lived the hookers and blow lifestyle?
I'm not sure how that lines up exactly. I'd have to see when the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon premiered, because it would have been like, the months leading up to that, when that period would have been. I believe he got 2 Greyhawk Adventures novels out before he got ousted from TSR. There are some other Greyhawk novels written by somebody, but by all accounts they're terrible. But I hear the ones that Gygax did are pretty decent.
Dude, I gotta get those. That sounds awesome.
I'll send it to you.
I guess that leaves me. I'm gonna shout out a new Tolkien book that I purchased recently and am not disappointed. It's fairly reasonably priced on Amazon as a hardcover. It's $20. I bought it on a impulse after listening to the editor Carl Hostetter do an interview on the Prancing Pony podcast for all you people who are into Tolkien. But anyway, it's called The Nature of Middle Earth. It's a really good book. It's another one of these in the vein of Christopher Tolkien, rest his soul, of taking old source material, drafts, rewrites, and things of that nature that Tolkien wrote to himself, and putting it into a theme and then sending it out. So The Nature of Middle Earth, it goes into such minutia. I can't help but love it. Anybody who is a world builder for the sake of it, kind of D&D nerd, it's a must read, because in it publishes the notes that Tolkien made about how he calculated the population of elves in the world through the different ages, like he down to the minutia of how often elves reproduced and what their peak reproduction age was, and like to that minutia, like they talk in the podcast jokingly about how Tolkien really shows off his math skills in here, because there are whole sections of this book about charts and where it's just long algebra basically of him calculating these populations and things. But that's how deep Tolkien really thought about his world over the years. But as the book goes on, it got into more metaphysical stuff, which I found more interesting, and it really affected the way I thought about cosmology when you're building your own worlds, and how Tolkien tried to make a statement, I guess, about Catholicism and providence and things like that, which as an atheist I didn't hate, which says something. So it's a great book. It's a great addition to any Tolkien collection, and I recommend it. It's great. I'm enjoying it.
Fucking patron saint of nerds, man. Jesus Christ. One more thing that just brought that to mind. Just one more question I have for you guys. Do you think the alignment is going to survive into 5.5?
Yes.
I think the words are going to be there.
Did they survive into 5th edition is a good question.
Fair point.
They were brought back into 5th edition a lot better than they were in 4th. There wasn't the 9 alignments in 4th edition. It was a line. It was from lawful, a straight line from lawful good to neutral to evil to chaotic evil.
Yeah, that's not canon.
I wouldn't be surprised if they just yank it out by the root. Maybe not, but I'll be surprised if it's still there.
All right, guys, what do you say we stop this bullshit and start rolling some dice?
Yeah.
This has been a production of Alien Familiar Media. You can find past episodes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. This production is protected under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivatives license. Music for this episode is Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale and can be found at freemusicarchive.org.